Parshas Bemidbar. So we're going to start, and we're going to really focus today on what was the purpose of the census. Parshas Bemidbar, in the wilderness, it starts with the census. But I'd like to first start by saying, where was this wilderness? Where does this book take place? It takes in the Sinai wilderness. That's where I was, God willing, thank Hashem, a couple of weeks ago, or less than 10 days ago. That's where I was standing, in the Sinai wilderness, and that's where the Mishkan was built. So this is 1 month. The story takes place 1 month after the Mishkan was established. The Mishkan was established on the first day of Nisan. And the book of Bemidbar starts on the first day of the second month, but it starts in the second year, meaning to say not the first year after they came out, but a year later, which is right after the Mishkan was built. So it says, God spoke to Moshe in the Sinai wilderness at the Oel Moed, the entrance to the tent, in the first day of the second month, in the second year, let's say, some Eretz Mitzrayim Limor, when they left Egypt, say, Se'u es Rosh Kodas B'nai Israel, lift up and count all the congregation of Israel, L'mishpachosam, for their families, Levei Savosam, according to their fathers' houses, B'mispar Shemos, by the number of their names, Kol Zachar L'Kol, every male according to their head count. Now, Rashi points out right from the very beginning, Hashem spoke in the wilderness. Rashi says, why are we counting again and again and again? Rashi says, this is the third count. We've already counted them twice. Rashi says, we counted the day they left Egypt, they were counted. And also they were counted right after the plague. And now we're being counted again. Again, we're being counted on this day, which is after the Mishkan was built. So why are we being counted? Rashi says, Mitochi basan, because of God's great love for them. So that's one way to understand it. Rashi says, Mitochi batan lefanav, because of Israel's dearness before him, monel tam kol shah. God counted them all the time, meaning again and again and again. Kishayatzu Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, Minan, he counted them. Kishanafu be'egel, Minan, when they fell by the golden calf, he counted them. And then Leida Minyana Notrim, there he wanted to know who didn't die. And when they wants to, God placed his presence upon them for the tabernacle, he counts them. So, okay. But before we go into what Rabbi Soloveitchik and the other commentaries say, I was thinking about it like this. We take for granted that we do a census. We take that for granted today. But what to me is so interesting, it says you count them by their father's house, by the number of their names. And also in this work, it says, in verse 18, it states, they were counted according to their families, by their father's homes. And I had this thought in the middle of the night. What other animal, what other creature in the world? So what does it mean they were counted by their father's names? They brought their lineage. Each tribe brings their lineage and traces it back. They trace it back to Jacob. They go back to Moses. They go back to the tribes. They all go back to Jacob. What other creature does this? There is no other species that does this. Now, okay, animals can know their parents. And every animal, not every animal, most animals, they know their mother. Fine. Some animals know their mother and their father. They're raised by both. Very much less. There are just a couple of animals, and you could check me on this, just very, very, very few animals, like an elephant maybe, and some monkey, like a couple of types of monkey, that know their grandparent, that know their grandmother, that their grandmother is perhaps involved in raising them. Do you know how many other animal species know their grandfathers? Zero. No other animal has this relationship back to their grandfather. Nothing. This is what's uniquely human. This is, and we can argue that this is something that was being taught here, that we are being told that we have greatness because of who we come from, that we go back to Moses, and we go back to Jacob, we go back to Aaron, we go back to Yaakov Avinu, we go back to Abraham. That's what we're being told at the beginning as we go out into the wilderness. This is the message that's being taught. You go back by your father's homes. No other animal can make this claim. No other species can make this claim that we have this lineage, that we have this relationship. Think about it. Can anybody tell me another creature that can trace their lineage back? No other creature can do that. No other creature can trace it back by their father's family. And that's the uniqueness of the human existence. And that's what's being emphasized to the Jewish people here, that we have to recognize that we are able to tell this story, this history of where we came from, in order to know how to act and do the next generation of acting. In this context, I want to share a few explanations about the mitzvah of counting and doing the lineage. So we start with Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik has some powerful. I saw 3 comments from Rabbi Soloveitchik in this context I wanted to share. After that, I saw some beautiful comments from Rabbi Wolbe, and I also saw some powerful comments from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I wanted to share all of them with you. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says in the work called Mesoras Rav, he writes, take a census of the entire assembly. So what was the purpose of the census? Now, bear in mind what I said earlier. I think the purpose was to elevate the Jewish people in order to remind us that we come from nobility, and we're part of this story. It gives us a purpose and a mission. This is what Rabbi Soloveitchik writes. What was the purpose of the census? Nachmanides offers 2 explanations. First, and by the way, you want to hear a beautiful share about Nachmanides? Tonight, Reb Baruch Roth is going to give a share at 8:15. So the first is that the Torah wishes to emphasize God's kindness in transforming 70 souls into a nation as numerous as the sand of the sea. We start off, Jacob goes down to Egypt, it's only 70 people, and now we're numerous like the sand of the sea. Number 2, so that each Jew would pass before Moses and Aaron and be known to them by name. Now, all of a sudden, right here with this explanation, Rabbi Soloveitchik, I find myself to be very close to what Rabbi Soloveitchik was saying. That is, the purpose of the census is to give each of us a place. It's not, why does the United States government do a census? Not for this reason. The United States government does a census not so that each person in this country feels like they have a place of importance, but so that we know how much money to give to each state, or we know how many congressmen come from where, and etc. It's not about empowering the individual, but this is what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. And the second reason for the census was so that each Jew would pass before Moses and Aaron and be known to them by name. Nachmanides' explanations reflect 2 types of counting. The purpose of the first type is simply to gain knowledge of the total number of an item. We want to know, how much there is. That's why the U.S. government does a census. It's a total that interests him. The individual coins we could care less about, and that's why we don't even have individual coins or bills today. How much money do you actually walk around with? Most people don't walk around with any. The second type of counting has a different objective. The ultimate goal is to recognize and appreciate each individual, and it's not really concerned with the total number. the way the Torah describes it, as Nachmanides understands, it says in the verse, let me show you where he's getting this from. It says in the verse, I have to read the verse here. It says, if you look at verse 43, and at verse 44, these are the numbers that Moses and Aaron counted. Moses and Aaron did the counting personally. So Nachmanides indicates that each person would pass before Moses and Aaron. They counted the people by going from house to house. In the process, learning about each family and how they lived. All of a sudden, we see that the purpose of the counting is not to gain a total number, but so that each person in the Jewish people would feel counted and important. The transmission of the second tablets initiated a new phase in the leadership of Moshe. With the giving of the second tablets, the covenant of the oral law began, and Moshe became the Rebbe. This is Rabbi Soloveitch's language. Moshe became the Rebbe of the entire Jewish people, and the Rebbe must know his students. Therefore, Hashem said, command Moses, take a census of the entire assembly of Israel by number of the names, every male according to their head count. It was not enough for Moses to know the total number of the Jewish people. Moses now had an added obligation as the Rebbe of the entire Jewish nation to know every Jew by name. The words mispar shemos, that's how they were counted. It says in the verse, lift up and count them b'mispar shemos. It doesn't just say b'mispar, it says by the number of their names. This suggests an intimate relationship with every individual. God commanded Moses to call each man by name. Each individual possessed something unique. And to be an effective Rabbi, Moshe had to know each person as an individual with his own background and life experience. Rabbi Soloveitchik actually gave this later in his life as he was already getting sick. But this is a very powerful idea that the purpose of this count was not to get the number, but to strengthen the relationship between Moshe and Aaron. And then he writes this idea, count them according to their fathers, to their families according to the house of their fathers. Families, he writes, are defined through patriarchs and not matriarchs. So I don't want to insult anyone, but the animals kingdom usually do it by the matriarchs because the father just spreads his seed everywhere. But not every animal, but I'm just saying in most, the majority. But a Kohen or a Levi attains his status through his father. Enlightened Jews have criticized this law as a slight to women's dignity. By the way, he put enlightened in quotes. They do not understand that the ideal of modesty is manifest in the patriarchally defined family. For families in primitive societies, children cannot identify their fathers. The sanctity of the Jewish family is therefore demonstrated by the fact that such lineage is identified through the patriarch. As the Midrash states, who can harm such a people who recognize their fathers?
Rabbi?
Yeah, hold on one second. Rabbi Soloveitchik also refers to another source, who's the paradigm of the grandfather in the Bible. The paradigm of the grandfather is Jacob blessing his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh. That's the paradigm. Jacob, we take that story today and we say, okay, so Jacob had this relationship with his grandchildren. But we have to say, whoa, this is mind-boggling that you have a relationship with your grandchildren is not the usual. This is what humanity is almost created for, to have this intergenerational relationship. And Rashi there identifies that Ephraim used to go and study with his grandfather to study Torah. He would study Torah with him at all times. And so therefore, that's the concept of what the Torah here is saying. Now we have to count, first of all, we've seen two reasons for counting, and on top of that, I'm adding this third, which is what I think Rabbi Soloveitchik is also saying. At first, they count just to gain the simple numbers. Secondly, they count to show the power of each individual, that each individual counts and has a relationship with their Rebbe Moshe. And the third explanation is to show that our nation goes back generations, and our nation also looks forward towards generations. We're taking the long-term view both to the past and to the future, and this is what makes us unique within the animal species. Okay, let's stop for a second here and take some questions from Bruce and April.